Hi, my name is Nichelle. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my version of the Booktube Newbie Tag. So this video was actually supposed to be a KU reading vlog where I read 5 books from Kindle Unlimited and tried to guess their plot before I read them. And I have read 3 of the 5 of them. And I did decide to scrap the video because I was really not enjoying the books I was reading. And so last night when I couldn't fall asleep, I was like, oh, I'll do the Booktube Newbie Tag. And I pulled up the questions and I was like, I don't really love these questions. And so in my 3 o'clock in the morning insomniac brain, I wrote new questions for myself. Should I write myself answers? No. That would be too easy. I'm keeping some of the questions from the original Booktube Newbie Tag, but I've also added a bunch of my own and deleted some of the ones that I just found kind of uninteresting. But for the most part, I think they are new. Let's jump right in with the first question, which is, why did you start this channel? So I started this channel in January of 2022. So I've been doing this for 8-ish months at this point. Not consistently, because 2022 took a turn that I didn't expect. So probably 2 weeks after I started this channel, I got a book deal. And if you've watched my how I got my book deal video, you'll know that my book deal was very unexpected. I originally started this channel because I had really gotten into watching BookTube back in 2021 and decided I wanted to start a BookTube channel. Mostly honestly to fulfill my aspirations of being a beauty guru back in 2010. I'm talking Juicy Star 07 and her sister All That Glitters 21. Those recording in front of their beds in their lime green bedrooms, beauty vloggers, beauty tubers. Back when tag videos were all the rage. BookTube gave me similar vibes and was also something I was very interested in because I love a good book. So that's why I decided to start my channel. I was oh, I guess I'll also be documenting to some extent my publishing journey, although those videos are much more sporadic because I read significantly more than I write, because I can only write a couple books a year. My second question that I'm keeping from the Booktube Newbie Tag is, why do you love reading? I have been a reader since I was very young. My mom is a really big reader, and my dad reads more than the average person, which is he reads maybe a book every month, every other month. My mom reads probably 100 books a year most years, and so I started reading when I was in elementary school. But reading has always been just a huge part of my life because my mom was always a big reader. But I kind of dropped off in college and have only recently, and by recently I mean in the past 4-ish years, gotten back into reading. And I think for me, the biggest reasons I read, there's kind of 2 reasons, and they're very different types of books, but I read 1 for escapism and 2 to build empathy. I think both of those are really important and critical parts of my reading experience. So I love a trashy KU novel. Am I learning anything about the human condition from that? Not really. Not usually. Sometimes an Emily Henry novel is going to therapy. So sometimes a romance novel can really work you through some stuff, but a lot of times it's just for vibes. And the other reason is for empathy. I think reading is one of the most impactful tools we have for building empathy. I'm a logical person. I love math. I get numbers, but I think things that really change your worldview and help you understand different perspectives on issues are stories from people. And I don't think it matters necessarily if they're fictional stories or real stories. I think one of the most important things we can do is, 1, be reading from stories that don't just come from people who look and sound like us, but making sure we're reading a diverse range of authors and a diverse range of experiences, because I think it really informs the way I see the world. It allows me to walk in someone else's shoes for a mile. So those are the 2 reasons I read. What book or series really got you into reading? Like I said, I've been a reader from the time I was really young. I didn't start reading in a recreational way until I was probably 2nd grade. I wasn't an early reader. Recreationally, I started reading in 2nd grade, and my jam was Cam Jansen. She had photographic memory, and she would take pictures with her head. And then, like I said, I also have read most of my life, but I kind of dropped off reading at such a regular pace. When I was in college, I would read a book here or there over the summer maybe, but wasn't reading for fun regularly when I was in college. And what started me reading again post-college, a few years post-college, I started reading thrillers, and those books were perfect because I could read them over the course of a Saturday. And that's really what got me back into reading, was reading Gillian Flynn, Ruth Ware, those sorts of thrillers. We love a thriller. What kind of books do you like to read? I like to read a pretty wide range of books. I love a fantasy, especially a fantasy romance. Like, I'm a Sarah J. Maas girl. I love a romance book. Romance books is probably like my highest category every year of reads, just because they're like really fast. I love a thriller, although I feel like I'm less inclined to pick up a thriller these days, just because I feel like I've read so many thrillers that I'm not finding the plots of them like as engaging it, which I don't think is the author's fault, just like a fault of me reading. Like, a lot of thrillers, eventually you like run out of like new twists that could happen. So I don't read a lot of those. I read some horror. I read contemporary. I read literary fiction. I read an occasional historical fiction here or there. There's not many things that I won't read. Next question. Now we're into these questions are the questions I made up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So hopefully they're quality. Are there any books you refuse to read? And by this, I personally am going to take this question that I wrote for myself to mean like kind of types of books or like specific things in books rather than like specific books themselves, because I think that's like a weird thing that's like very popular on TikTok right now, is people being like, I would never read a Colleen Hoover book. And I'm like, okay. I mean, you don't have to, but like, weird. Books I refuse to read. I tend to not love like pop fiction written by men and like dad books, like classically dad books. I would kind of consider them books that are about like spies written by men. I wouldn't like totally refuse to read them, but I tend to have better luck with women authors unless it's like a book that is like really renowned or like literary. Because like if there's literary merit, normally I can deal with the fact that a boy wrote it. But if there's like not literary merit and we're just reading it for the vibes, then like I'm not super inclined to read books by guys. I just feel like they don't have the right vibes. Like, the vibes are often off. And this is not true across the board, but it does tend to be true. But like, I read Blake Crouch's Dark Matter and I loved it last year. So like, it's not a hard and fast rule. But that tends to be like, not a genre, but like a type of book I avoid. I also don't, like I said, I don't read much historical fiction, so it's got to be like something that I like really think is going to be like truly outstandingly amazing. I need it to be like on the top 100 books that you should read in your lifetime list before I'm reading a historical fiction. Because I read probably like 2 historical fictions a year and they need to be like really good. Really good. I don't need like 12 different books about a mom in World War II. Like, no offense to World War II as a genre, but like, I've read enough World War II literature. Will I read more? Yeah, there's like more that I like want to read. I've never read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and I like know I want to read that. So like, it will happen, but that's like something I tend to avoid. I'm not a big historical fiction reader. I tend to not love super high fantasy, but I like loved Throne of Glass so much last year that I'm like, I think I might be trying to get into it. But we shall see. If you were writing a book, what would it be about? I'm going to take this not to, because I do write books. I have a book coming out next year. It is still untitled, but it's coming. And I'm not going to take that to talk to you about that book because if I could write any book, it wouldn't be that book anymore, because now that book is like under deadline and has pressures and contracts and things. So it's significantly less fun than it was at the beginning. If I could write any book, I think it would be like a fantasy romance series, like A Discovery of Witches or From Blood and Ash, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Those books just like really get my like endorphins going, and endorphins? Probably not endorphins. My dopamine. The dopamine in my brain pops off on those. And I would love to like write one. Ugh, a delight. I have written one that like reminds me a lot of Discovery of Witches, but I don't know. It was the first thing I ever wrote and it's kind of garbagey. So, because I was learning. I was a bebe. But if I were to write any book just like for funsies and like know it was going to be good, it would be that. Because those books hit the spot like no other. Like a good one, a good fantasy romance really like hits the spot. Do you have any bookish tattoos? I don't. I don't have any bookish tattoos. If I were to get a bookish tattoo, I would get a fig, which is a reference to The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I read that book earlier this year and I like loved it. I loved the book. I've had that passage about the fig tree. I've heard it before. Obviously, it's like a pretty famous passage, but I like read it again and I was like, I like truly love this. I saw my life branching out before me, like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G., the amazing editor, and the other fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Atlia and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions, and another fig was an Olympic crew lady champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting on the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of these figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And, as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. And so it's just like about like the crippling anxiety, I think, of being in your early 20s. And I just really vibe with it. And so if I were going to get a bookish tattoo, it would be a fig. What is the first book you remember loving? I love this question because I think children's connections with books are like so special. I loved books so much when I was a kid. I would walk around and read all the time. I got in trouble because I was reading too much. There's just nothing like that childlike connection to books. It's delightful. The first books I kind of remember loving, one of my favorite books, and the book that I claimed as my childhood favorite, is Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. I loved this book. I also loved her other book, Thief Lord. Inkheart is about this girl whose dad can read things out of books, and it is so magical and so delightful, and was just one of my favorite books as a child. I also loved the Golden Compass series by Philip Pullman. Just a really interesting, engaging series. So those would be kind of the first two books I remember truly adoring. And this question I didn't write down at 3 a.m., but I would like to know your answer, so I'm adding it now. Since this is my book tag now, we're adding it. And this is what is the first fictional character death that you remember as so you should plan these questions ahead. Which is the first fictional character whose death you remember and left an impact on you? Because I remember mine viscerally, and that was this is a spoiler for the Harry Potter series. Okay. When Sirius Black died in Harry Potter, I mourned that man you would not believe. It ripped my heart out of my chest. I did not understand that books could hurt you this badly. I read that book when I was probably in 4th or 5th grade, and truly it wrecked me. It wrecked me. It ruined me. Oh, I hated it so much. I reread the Harry Potter books over quarantine, or I listened to them on audio, and yeah, that man's death still, had me weeping. I am of the firm belief that Sirius Black is the saddest death in the Harry Potter series. My mom thinks it's Dumbledore. She's wrong. It's Sirius Black. Reading preferences, ebook, physical, audio. I tend to kind of split my reading 50-50 between physical books and ebooks. I like to have a physical book and an ebook going at all times. And ebooks I love for one, chunkier books, fantasy books, just because the books are big and kind of cumbersome. Silly but true. And romance books. Just romance books because I go through them so quickly, and it's nice. I love a KU book. I use Libby all the time. It's nice to be able to just kind of go through them kind of quickly, and I also like to be able to read them in bed. I'm blind as a bat without my glasses on, and so I set the font size to 150 on my phone, and I can read them without my glasses on, which is nice, and I can't do that with a physical book. So I do, but I don't have a Kindle or anything, so I do read on my phone and on my iPad, probably about for maybe a third-ish of my books, third to half of my books, and then the other half is physical. I don't do audio very much, and when I do, I almost always do it with a physical book when I'm having a really hard time focusing because I'm watching too many TikToks and my brain is not working as well as it should, which is what happens to me when I watch too many TikToks. I will sometimes play the audiobook in my ears as at 3-ish times speed as I follow along, because it helps me focus in, because then my brain can't dart around and wander. So I do audiobooks that way, but I don't do a ton of audiobooks just by themselves unless they're rereads. One, because it's too easy for my brain to drift off and lose track of the audiobook, and two, because part of the thing that's important to me about reading is, one, I like to see the writing on the page. I'm a writer, and so it's important for me to see words in front of me, but also because part of it is a practice of focusing on one thing at a time, because I'm really bad at that. If I'm watching TV, I'm also on my phone, and I might also be on my computer. I'm very bad at unitasking, and so I think reading for me and just doing that one thing is a really good practical skill for my brain. And so I don't do a lot of audiobooks, but I do kind of split between physical and ebook. Any strange reading habits? I don't think I have any strange like reading habits, but I do have strange book habits. I think the biggest one, the kind of like the silliest one, but one that I like have done since childhood and still do, is I love a horror book, I love a thriller, but I am a chicken. I like get scared very, very easily. And so if a book is like at all scary to me, it cannot come in my bedroom. Like I won't read it in my bed. I'll only read it in like, you know, like the living room or like out in the world. And like at night, I won't even bring it into my bedroom. Like the physical book itself has to stay out in the world. This started like as a child because my mom like told me that this is like, if a book is scary to you, just like don't bring it into your bedroom. And like if it's really scary, you can like put it in a drawer or a cupboard, or sometimes we even put books in the freezer. And I don't do that anymore. The freezer thing, sometimes they do go in cupboards. Like if you're really scary, I need to keep your vibes away from me while I'm sleeping, in a drawer. In a similar sense, I like loved the book A Little Life. It like ruined me. It wrecked my heart and mind for like, I think it like permanently altered me. And I like refused to purchase a copy of that book because I think the vibes are like terrible. Like the vibes are too sad and bad in that book, and I don't want it in my house. So like very much believe that books, like physical books, do have vibes. Next, are you a rereader? I would have said no up until a few years ago, up until the pandemic really. The pandemic really like sparked a rereading craze in me, and I reread a ton of things. Like I said, I reread Harry Potter over the pandemic. I reread the Selection series. I reread Hush Hush. I reread The Raven Cycle. A lot of them I did on audio. And then ever since then, I've like continued. I reread From Blood and Ash. Every time a new From Blood and Ash book has come out, I've started from the beginning. I read the first two. I didn't start until the second one was already out. So I read the first two, and then I reread the first two when the third one came out, and then I reread all three when the fourth one came out. Like, I love a reread. From Blood and Ash is one of my like favorite guilty pleasure series. Same thing with the Court of series. I reread that before I read Silver Flames, and right now I'm doing a Throne of Glass reread. And I've reread Discovery of Witches multiple times. Discovery of Witches I read for the first time by Deborah Harkness, one of my all-time favorite series. I read for the first time when I was in Italy, which was the first time I had ever been out of the country, and I was traveling by myself, and so it became like very much like a comfort series for me. And so I have reread that multiple times, especially when I'm traveling. Like I love reading a Discovery of Witches when I'm traveling because it's like very comforting to me. So now I do reread. I also recently reread Emily Henry books. Rereading has become something that has happened for me. And I guess I did reread a bit in high school because I think I probably read Twilight at least a dozen times. New Moon maybe like 15, a few more than Twilight. New Moon's my favorite. Eclipse I've read probably like 4 or 5 times. And Breaking Dawn I read once. I like hated Breaking Dawn, will never reread it again. So, update on that. I do reread. I like wouldn't consider myself a huge rereader. I don't allow myself to count rereads towards my book goal because I like really fear falling back into my high school habit of just reading Twilight over and over again. But I do reread an occasional book here or there, mostly just as like a comfort thing. Like it's very comforting to read a book that you already know everything that's going to happen in. And mostly fantasy romance because that's like my favorite comfort series. Do you read more than one book at a time? Yes. I almost always have like 5 books going at once. I like to have a romance going. I like to have like a Kindle Unlimited book going. I like to have a fantasy book going. I like to have a literary fiction book going. Like I like to have a lot going at once. I find that's the best way for me to get through a lot of books at a time because like literary fiction tends to read slower, and like I don't tend to want to like sit down and devour a whole literary fiction book in a sitting, but I do want to make sure those are incorporated because they're some of my favorite books. And so like it's important for me to have like kind of a mix, or like a romance book I can read in a night. Same thing with like a thriller. So I almost always have like 5-ish books going at a time. Last question, which is, do you DNF books? And then if so, how did you decide when to DNF a book? So I for sure DNF books. Not super regularly. I like don't mind. My mom like never gives out 1 or 2 stars because she just like will not finish books that she's not enjoying. But I don't DNF super often, but if I'm really not vibing with a book, I try to get it to the 20% mark of that book. And if I'm still not vibing, then I go to the Goodreads reviews and kind of like read through some of the reviews to see if like this is a problem that goes away or if it's a problem that like continues. So I don't really pay a lot of attention to the Goodreads ranking because I find star rankings to be like fairly unhelpful, but I do like look and I'm like, are other people having the same problem as I am? Does it resolve itself? sometimes the Goodreads reviews do steer me wrong and I continue in a book because I was told it would improve and it doesn't. And that's how I get 1 and 2 star books. But I definitely do DNF. I also have a habit of a book, since I'm reading like 4 or 5 books at a time normally, sometimes a book will just like fall by the wayside. Like I'll be like, oh, I'm still reading that. But like the second book in the Scythe series that Neil Schusterman has been like currently reading for like, I don't know, 9 months at this point. And it's not a book that I like have formally DNF'd, but like, am I going to finish it? Who knows at this point? Who knows? There we go. That was the Booktube Newbie new version tag. I will leave the questions down below if you want to answer them in a video. I would love to hear your thoughts on your like reading habits and things. And I will talk to you in the next video. Bye.